I was widowed for 30 years and struggled to become a first-class lady of the realm. Only on my deathbed did I learn that his marriage to me had always been just to let my sister go. I was trapped in the inner manor for 15 years, holding up the entire duke's estate for him. At 35, he succumbed to the poison of the alchemical elixirs. On his deathbed, he refused to see me even one last time. Now, I have been reborn at the Imperial marriage banquet. Looking up, I see Wei Chenbi hesitating, while my sister beside me is clutching her handkerchief tightly, her fingertips turning white, her eyes darting around, not daring to look at me. In an instant, I understand. The three of us have all returned. If he chooses me, he repeats the past and dies early. If he chooses my sister, he ruins her career as a female official. If he chooses neither, it is defying an imperial decree, leading to asset seizure and exile. In front of the full house of guests, I couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. As if hearing my mockery, Wei Chenbi suddenly snapped his gaze toward me. Bitter enemies meeting again, harboring deep-seated hatred. He seemed to have made up his mind. Walking straight toward where my sister and I were seated, he stood right in front of me, his face filled with rage.
Eldest Miss Ling, if I must marry a daughter of the Ling family today, do you think I should marry you? Or your sister?
Before I could speak, Mei'er suddenly stood up beside me.
Young Duke Wei, since you and I are the ones truly in love, then I should be the one to marry you.
Wei Chenbi did not agree. Instead, he asked me,
What do you think, eldest Miss Ling?
I was stunned. At this moment in our previous life, Mei'er did not say this. Back then, we had both just passed the female official selection, and she and Wei Chenbi were deeply in love, on the verge of discussing marriage. But the duke's estate had a rule. Once married in, a woman must remain strictly within the inner quarters, focusing solely on managing the household and raising the children, would absolutely never allow Mei'er to go out and work as a female official every day. The two of them had a massive fight over this. At the Lantern Festival 3 days ago, Wei Chenbi tried to persuade her again, but Mei'er declared,
Even if I marry an ordinary man and waste my life away, I still wouldn't want to be locked up in the Duke's inner chambers.
Out of spite, Wei Chenbi begged the emperor to decree a marriage, allowing him to marry the legitimate daughter of the Ling family. My family has only 2 legitimate daughters, my sister and me. At the spring gathering, he walked straight toward us and asked me the exact same question, asking whom he should choose. I understood. Although Wei Chenbi was asking me, he was actually giving Mei'er one last chance. But she grit her teeth and chose her career over marriage.
Fine, Ling Zhaoyu, I will grant your wish. From now on, I shall be your brother-in-law from now on.
Wei Chenbi immediately produced the imperial decree to pressure me, declaring he would marry me. Beside me, Mei'er's breath caught, her eyes welling with tears. A wedding is supposed to be a joyous occasion, yet Wei Chenbi clenched his teeth tightly. Though he was marrying me, his eyes were fixed on Mei'er the entire time. But now, Mei'er has willingly chosen to marry him. She must have been reborn as well. This is perfect. The three of us can start anew, to return to our respective proper paths. I leisurely took a bite of a crisp peach and replied to Wei Chenbi with a beaming smile. The two of you discussing marriage has nothing to do with me. Instead of consulting your parents or a matchmaker, you are asking me instead, brother-in-law. As if hearing the title, brother-in-law, his face darkened. After staring at me for a long while, Wei Chenbi took Mei'er's hand.
Mei'er, marrying you is my lifelong wish. Rest assured, once you marry into my family, I will certainly protect you. I will never let anyone mistreat you, and I am determined never to take concubines.
I couldn't help myself again and let out a cold sneer. In our past life, I was the one who married into his family. The reason I was trapped and wasted my life in the inner courtyard was entirely due to his utter indifference. Inside the Duke of Ding's estate, the old Duke was obsessed with cultivating immortality and ignored all household affairs, leaving the entire family's management to his second wife, Lady Bai. Lady Bai was tyrannical and overbearing. After I married in, she made things difficult for me in every possible way, while desperately clinging to her authority. Seeing that Wei Chenbi ignored me, her own 2 sons and daughter also began to stir up trouble. The entire family constantly targeted me, stuffing concubines into our chambers every few days to act as spies. At first, I couldn't understand why. We minded our own business and didn't interfere with each other. So why did she indulge Wei Chenbi, yet go out of her way to torment his wife? It wasn't until they began encouraging Wei Chenbi to follow the old Duke in cultivating immortality and taking elixirs that I finally understood. They didn't want Wei Chenbi to leave behind any heirs, and they even wanted to usurp his title. Their intentions were utterly malicious. Those so-called immortal elixirs were mostly made of cinnabar, sulfur, and saltpeter. Taking them over a long period would severely damage one's health. They were by no means some medicine for longevity. In the past, I bluntly told Wei Chenbi, "Those pills are toxic. Your stepmother is just waiting for you to die. Stop taking them immediately." But he just laughed in amusement.
Ha 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 ha. If I die, what good would that do them?
I rolled my eyes and said, "Is my husband's head filled with mush? If you lose your life, Lady Bai's son can take over the family estate." Wei Chenbi turned a deaf ear to my words, saying that Lady Bai had been in the family for 10 years and treated him even better than her own children, and that his younger siblings also respected and honored him. He claimed that even after he inherited the title, he wouldn't have the heart to separate the household from them. When he said this, 2 immortal elixirs were sitting right in front of him. He refused to drink the nourishing soup I personally brewed, yet he swallowed Lady Bai's poison without any suspicion. In my anger, I kicked the table over and threw away every single immortal pill in the room. Seeing that I wouldn't listen to his scolding, Wei Chenbi spent all his days sleeping in his concubines' rooms, refusing to spare me even a single glance. Those women were sent by Lady Bai, so they surely fanned the flames every day and tricked him into swallowing many highly toxic pills. He swore to me that we would never associate with each other until death. Sitting idly in the afternoon, I carefully calculated my options. Our marriage was bestowed by imperial decree. Even if Wei Chenbi were no longer around, as the matriarch of the Duke's estate, I still had to support this household. Even if I didn't care about his survival, I still had to consider my own future, to secure my own retreat, and to fulfill the responsibility of the imperially decreed marriage. I gave birth to our eldest son Zheng'er with Wei Chenbi. From then on, I took action without any restraint. I drove away the concubines, seized control of the household management, found a suitable marriage for my half-sister to marry far away, and sent my half-brothers to the military camps for training. My stepmother, Lady Bai, had committed countless evil deeds and exhausted all her schemes, and ultimately gained nothing. She fell ill from her pent-up frustration and passed away from illness. At this time, not long after the old duke passed away, the poison also reached Wei Chenbi's heart, leaving him bedridden for a long time. The entire household became my domain. When I was 10 years old, we hit a major drought. Seeing the land covered in corpses, my heart ached at the sight. So I decided to become a female official in the future, to love and protect the people, and to do my part for the common folk of the world. Therefore, in my past life, after taking control of the Duke's estate, I found another way to realize my ambition. Under the guise of praying for my husband's blessings, I requested imperial permission to aid the disaster victims. This wealth originally came from the people, so using it to aid the disaster victims, it was truly a matter of taking from the people and using it for the people. I had winter clothes sewn, porridge booths set up, and established schools for girls and orphanages. On the day Wei Chenbi died of his illness, I received a petition of gratitude signed by thousands of citizens. That was the first time since I married Wei Chenbi that I shed tears. Outsiders all said I couldn't forget my late husband, but only my youngest son, Zheng'er, whom I raised myself, understood me best. As he wiped away my tears, he softly comforted me.
Do not be consumed by grief and sorrow. Please take care of your health for the sake of the people, mother.
Later on, Zheng'er, whom I raised to be skilled in both scholarly and martial arts, grew up to be clever and capable. He entered court as an official, remaining clean and just. Whenever he faced difficult problems, he would often come to consult me, which indirectly fulfilled my dream of participating in state affairs. In the end, Zheng'er eventually rose to the position of prime minister, with his students spread all across the land. To the outside world, I was a heroine of the Ling family, second to no man, and who raised her son well, and had long forgotten that crowd of mediocre fools in the Duke's estate, living my life over again. If there is truly anything I cannot let go of, it is only my elegant and handsome Zheng'er. But, my dear child, I am first and foremost myself, Ling Zhaoyu, and only then am I your mother. In this lifetime, I will still live for myself, and I will live a life of different and spectacular brilliance. So, the moment I stepped through the door, I spoke to my parents. Since the clan has rules regarding the order of seniority, then let us proceed as originally planned. I will marry General Huo first to repay his kindness, and then my younger sister will marry into the Duke's household by imperial decree. I want to swap marriages with my sister. General Huo Fengqiao of the valiant cavalry and I had crossed paths in both my past and present lives. In the first year, I followed my master to the south to manage the floods. The torrents were fierce and breached the dikes. I pushed my master to the safety of the shore, but tumbled into the river myself. It just so happened that Huo Fengqiao was heading south to suppress bandits. Seeing the danger, he jumped into the water himself and dragged me ashore. Seeing that I was out of breath, he gave me artificial respiration. This saved my life. The onlookers gathered around to watch the excitement.
But men and women should not touch so intimately.
If General Huo doesn't marry her, no other man will ever dare to take this girl.
The cold-faced general furrowed his brow.
That was a life-saving act.
How can we use that to force someone into marriage?
Heaven as my witness. From those words and actions alone, I knew Huo Fengqiao was a rare gentleman. I laughed heartily and chimed in. If a man refuses to marry me because of this, then he is nothing good anyway. I wouldn't even spare them a glance. He suddenly looked at me, his eyes flickering, and his brow slowly relaxed.
If you can stay so open-minded, my lady, you will surely have a peaceful life.
I cupped my hands in salute just as he did, and replied teasingly, "And since you are so kind and sensible, General, you will surely return alive. Therefore, after returning home, I agreed to my parents' wish for me to marry him, and it wasn't entirely to repay his favor. A man of integrity is like fine jade. I truly liked him in my heart. I truly detested how Wei Chenbi had messed everything up, altering the destinies of the four of us. I didn't know if I had married Huo Fengqiao in my past life, whether his fate of dying in Jiangdong could have been averted, but I knew that I at least wouldn't have suffered like Mei'er did. Mei'er was not a bad person. Even though she had no feelings for Huo Fengqiao, she still raised his younger sister well for him, and even brought her into the palace to serve as an official. But Mei'er had loved being part of a big, bustling family since childhood. Consequently, before she even turned 22, she wasted away, holding the fort alone in the cold, quiet general's estate. She must have envied how lively and crowded my duke's estate was. But I am different. Even if there is no one to accompany me, I would still resolutely walk my own path. There are many things to look forward to in life, and they do not all revolve around marriage. Besides, since childhood, I had always been better at enduring solitude than Mei'er. In the female official examinations, the reason I ranked higher than her was also due to the Empress's praise.
The eldest daughter of the Ling family has the resilience of a solitary pine on a cliff. She will surely rise to the occasion in times of adversity. Finding such a good official is entirely a matter of luck.
Your Majesty, I missed the chance in my past life, but in this life, I will never fail your kindness. Now, Mei'er and I were married one after the other. In our red bridal robes, we sisters held hands, finally welcoming the happiness we desired. Right before I stepped out the door, I advised Mei'er, although the Duke's estate is lively and bustling, human hearts are unpredictable. Many great families are ruined by internal power struggles. You must never let your guard down, especially since I heard the old Duke is practicing Taoist alchemy. How many lives have been claimed by those toxic elixirs? Haven't we sisters seen enough of that? If you can persuade him, do so. If you really can't, at least stay away from them yourself. But this time, Wei Chenbi was marrying her, and he had sworn to have only one wife for his entire life, with a husband to protect and help her. It would surely be a bit easier for her. Mei'er nodded in agreement and advised me in turn.
Eldest sister,
Since ancient times, how many return from war?
since you are marrying a military man, you should also keep an open mind. If the worst should happen, spend more time on your duties in the palace, or go out with our younger sister to clear your mind. You must never grieve alone, lest you fall ill from sorrow.
In our past life, although Mei'er managed her official duties in an orderly fashion and left a good reputation for generations, when she retired and returned to her hometown, she thought of the lover she had lost in the past. Seeing no one by her side, she was consumed by longing and sorrow, and eventually died of illness before I did. So at this moment, the two of us shared the lessons we had learned from our past mistakes with absolute sincerity. My eyes grew warm. I patted the back of Mei'er's hand and gently caressed her cheek. My dear Mei'er, may both of us sisters have our wishes fulfilled and find a smooth path ahead. I smoothly married into the general's estate. When the red veil was lifted, what appeared before my eyes was that handsome, as always expressionless face, draped in a bright red robe. Huo Fengqiao's face looked as fair as white jade. We were supposed to drink the nuptial cup, but he sat down beside me, holding his wine cup, and said with a sad, lowered head,
The eldest Miss Ling shouldn't have married me.
My heart gave a sudden start. Could he have been reborn too? Could it be that he and Mei'er were husband and wife in our past life, and now that he has feelings for her, I have forced myself between them? My heart filled with panic, and I asked him what he meant. Huo Fengqiao explained,
You married into my house today, and you have probably seen it too. Both my parents are gone, leaving only an 8-year-old sister.
He tightened his grip on the wine cup, his brow furrowing deeply.
Household chores are invisible, yet the most exhausting. I am away fighting wars all year round, and I know I don't do much. There is no one to help with the household chores.
He turned his head to look me in the eyes,
Fearing his wife would suffer.
In truth, whether in our past life or this one, when Huo Fengqiao came to propose to our family, he had been rejected every time. In our past life, seeing Wei Chenbi choose me instead, Mei'er was partly acting out of anger and partly truly grateful to Huo Fengqiao for saving me, so she forced the marriage by threatening her own life. The great general had no choice but to comply. But now, I gave him a gentle smile, my eyes sparkling. How do you know, General, that I didn't truly want to marry you? A look of confusion appeared in Huo Fengqiao's eyes, and he asked me,
Has the eldest Miss Ling really thought this through?
I said frankly, having no parents-in-law means one less source of care, but it also means one less source of torment. Your sister, I promise to raise her for you no matter what, as long as you don't stop me from serving as an official in the palace. He quickly waved his hand.
I won't stop you.
Taking advantage of the moment, I grabbed his large hand, interlocking our fingers. Huo Fengqiao's palm was covered in rough calluses, burning hot like charcoal. His Adam's apple bobbed, and his handsome face turned visibly red.
Miss Ling.
Once we drink this nuptial cup, you will have to call me wife. Husband. I leaned in close to Huo Fengqiao and personally fed him the wine. The great general, usually as cold and rigid as iron, lowered his head shyly before me.
Wife.
I gently caressed the calluses on his palm, which were left by years of holding a saber. This general, who struck terror into the hearts of his enemies on the battlefield, now looked like an innocent youth. Huo Fengqiao suddenly grabbed my hand, his eyes earnest, and said,
Wife. I am a military man who leads troops in battle. Life and death are unpredictable, and there is no telling when I might die on the battlefield. It won't be easy for you to remarry with a child. If you are afraid, I will absolutely not touch you.
Looking into those sincere, bright eyes, my heart warmed. I sat up straight and looked at him seriously. Huo Fengqiao, since today is our wedding day, let's make things clear between us. My marrying you is both from the bottom of my heart and after careful consideration. If you have me in your heart as well, you must never do what you did tonight again, underestimating me without even asking me first. His eyes were instantly filled with guilt. He stood up.
When I first met you, my wife, I knew from our very first meeting that the eldest daughter of the Ling family, Zhaoyu, was a heroine among women. You controlled the floods and brought peace to the people, unafraid of gossip. I did not want to waste your youth, and I had never thought of marrying or having children. But once I met you, I couldn't help but harbor feelings I shouldn't have.
Before me, this rigid general began to shed his indestructible armor.
So marrying you was also out of my own selfishness. I have you in my heart. From beginning to end, there has only been you.
He cupped his hands in a respectful bow to me.
Tonight is my fault. I knew my lady was as resilient as a pine tree, yet I still measured the heart of a gentleman with the mind of a petty man.
I waved my hand. Forget it. I have too many outstanding qualities. My husband can slowly discover them in the future. Huo Fengqiao smiled along with me. I pulled him over to sit by the edge of the bed. The red candles flickered, casting a warm glow on our slightly flushed cheeks. The bed curtains slowly fell, shutting out the noise of the outside world. On this night, two lonely souls finally found their home in each other. The red candles burned all night. The next day, when the sun was high in the sky and the sunlight spilled into the room through the window lattice, the two of us finally woke up at our leisure. Not having to get up early to serve tea to parents-in-law really saved a lot of trouble, but I still kissed Huo Fengqiao awake. On the first day of marriage, we definitely had to have lunch with his little sister. His sister's name was Liange. Although her parents had passed away early, she was raised to be fair-skinned, chubby, and healthy, which showed how much care Huo Fengqiao had put into her. But from the very first glance, I noticed that Liange looked at me with a hint of timid obsequiousness. She took the initiative to pour tea for me, helped serve me food, and even brought over a plate of sweet osmanthus glutinous rice cakes. Liange's voice was as soft as a kitten's, and her big round eyes were filled with caution.
Sister-in-law, I made these sweet cakes myself. I hope you like them.
I glanced at Huo Fengqiao. He had probably noticed Liange's fear as well, and felt a bit awkward. He tried to smooth things over, saying,
Whatever sister-in-law likes to eat, brother will make it in the future. There is open fire in the kitchen, and it is easy to get hurt. Liange, don't go there anymore, all right?
Liange did not dare to say a word, only looking at me obediently. I took the sweet cakes from her and asked, They are so delicate. It must have taken a lot of time. What time did you get up to make them, little sister? Liange scratched her head and answered me honestly.
I don't know the time, but I remember it was still very dark outside. Nanny said I just needed to finish them early and wait for sister-in-law to arrive, so as not to neglect the etiquette.
The spring chill is freezing. Have you been waiting here all morning? Seeing Liange nod, my face darkened slightly. I gently placed the cakes on the edge of the table. The room fell into a dead silence. I coldly swept my gaze over the maids and older servants standing below, then suddenly smiled and said, I wonder which one is the nanny. You certainly know how to conduct yourself and manage things. Hearing my praise, and thinking there would be a reward, an older servant adorned with gold and silver stepped forward. She bowed to me, her face beaming with smiles.
First, madame, it is indeed this old servant.
She must have raised Liange, which is why Huo Fengqiao treats her with such respect. I calmly continued to ask, I see Liange is so good at reading people's expressions, and is so well-mannered. She must have had guidance from an expert. But I wonder, Nanny, What exactly did you teach her to make an 8-year-old girl so obedient? It is actually even more impressive than the upbringing in our noble household. Thinking she had won my favor, the nanny spilled everything without holding back.
I told the second young lady, your brother is away at war all year round. Now that your new sister-in-law has married in, she will surely be the one running the household. If you still want to have a place here and not lose your standing, you must, starting today, listen to your sister-in-law in everything.
Even Huo Fengqiao, who knew nothing of domestic affairs, could tell something was wrong. Frowning, he said,
Nanny, you shouldn't have taught Liang such things.
Seeing me sipping my tea leisurely with my chin tilted up, the nanny became even more reckless with her words.
The general is away for months at a time. How could he know the rules of the inner court?
I chimed in and asked, then please tell me, nanny, the rules of the general's inner court, who sets them now? She hastily bowed and scraped before me.
Of course it is you, madam.
She even reached out to pull Lianzhi's arm.
Second young lady, quickly pay your respects to your sister-in-law. Say that you will listen to her in everything from now on.
I grabbed the nanny's wrist, gave a shove, and pushed her hard to the ground. I pulled Lianzhi into my arms, gently stroked her trembling shoulders, and comforted her softly, saying, Lianzhi, don't be afraid, this is my home. And it is your home even more. No one can drive you away, and no one can make decisions for you, or force you to marry someone you don't like. I cannot do it, and neither can your brother. Lianzhi looked at me closely. The tears in her eyes, which had been red with fear, gradually began to recede. Only then did the nanny understand my underlying meaning. She realized my behavior just now was meant to build her up high, only to watch her fall hard. In my past life, in the Duke's estate, from my stepmother to the concubine's daughters, and from the maids to the older servants, there were people far more malicious than her everywhere. I had countered every move and adapted to every situation, finding that the most effective method was still this tactic of excessive praise to bring about a fall. The nanny hastily begged me for mercy, saying she had done wrong and shouldn't have bullied the second young lady. I looked at Huo Fengqiao and informed him, husband, since I am now the mistress of the inner court, when I see a fault, it is only right that I clean it up. Huo Fengqiao, of course, knew that I was doing this for Lianzhi's sake. He quietly raised an eyebrow and smiled, leaving me to make the decision. I declared, instigating an 8-year-old child to suffer and toil is both unreasonable and heartless. Nanny, considering you raised her, I will not use household punishment. I will give you travel money, and you are to leave the estate immediately. She began to plead and argue, saying her entire family relied on the general's estate, and that they might not survive if they left. I nodded slowly. I almost forgot. You old servants love nothing more than relying on your meager contributions to bring your whole families along to sponge off us. Where is the housekeeper? Kick the wet nurse's entire family out of the manor today. If anyone makes a scene, hand them all over to the authorities. I stared intently at the wet nurse, terrifying her so much that she didn't dare utter another word. Wet nurse, quit while you're ahead, so everyone can save some face. If you provoke my anger, I, Ling Zhaoyu, have always been strictly business. Anyon, who has grown a backbone, is more than welcome to try me. After making an example of her to warn the others, the general's estate instantly became much quieter. The desserts that Lianzhi made with her own hands that day, the two of us ate every last bite together. The next day, I dragged Huo Fengqiao out of bed early to cook Lianzhi's favorite red bean glutinous rice balls. Once she woke up, I personally brought them to her and happily fed them to her. In my past life, I treated Zheng'er the same way in my past life. Whenever they suffered some grievance, I would immediately make it up to them in the exact same way. This way, when Lianzhi sees sweet osmanthus rice cakes in the future, she will only think of them as a sweet treat, rather than recalling the sad memories of her childhood. Little children are very easy to coax, as long as the adults are willing to put in a little heart. Seeing that I genuinely treated her well, Lianzhi grew more cheerful day by day around me. Mei'er is 4 years younger than me. When I was a teenager, there was a time when our parents were very busy, so it fell to me to look after her. That year, I personally wove flower crowns for Mei'er, built her a swing, accompanied her in painting and playing the zither, and snuck out with her to watch shadow puppet plays. Now, I treat Lianzhi the exact same way. On a clear early summer afternoon, with the azaleas and crabapples in full bloom, in front of a patch of pink blossoms, Lianzhi climbed onto my back and covered my head with flowers. Our laughter drifted over the red wall. Occasionally, I would look back and see Huo Fengqiao standing under the veranda. He was staring intently at us, not wanting to blink. Dressed in a blue-green robe, his eyes grew red. He turned around, coughed softly, and held back his tears. When he turned back, all he showed me and Lianzhi, nothing but gentle, smiling faces. As the moon climbs upon the treetops in the dead of night, Huo Fengqiao gently hugged me from behind. Resting his head on my shoulder, he whispered,
I am 10 years older than my sister, so I had over a decade of our parents' love and care. But for as long as as Liange can remember. She has only had me, an older brother who was rarely around. I know this, she is my sister. And I shouldn't have pushed the responsibility of caring for her onto you. But lately, watching the two of you live and laugh together, and seeing how you treat her just like your own sister, it warms my heart in ways I can't describe. I used to think that people had to be together for decades before they could promise never to part. But we have been married for barely 100 days, and I already cannot live without you.
I teased him, asking where General Huo, who was always so cold and taciturn, had learned such sweet talk. I gently touched his shoulder and comforted him softly. Then I cannot live without you either. How about that? But Huo Fengqiao slowly shook his head.
Someone as bright and clever as you would have a good life no matter who you married. I am different. If I leave you, it will be hard to ever have such a wonderful home again.
I nodded in agreement and repeatedly said he was right. Huo Fengqiao's greatest strength was his clear mind and sharp vision. He could see through the ways of the world, knowing what to keep and what to let go. Therefore, in the height of summer, when an urgent imperial decree arrived, ordering him to lead troops into battle, I actually felt a pang of reluctance to see him go. Even though I knew that Huo Fengqiao would not face his fatal danger until next summer, I was still somewhat worried. Lenj and I stayed up all night sewing a pair of knee pads, which I handed to Huo Fengqiao as he sat atop his tall, handsome steed. My voice trembled more than I expected. Husband, please take care of yourself. Do not get hurt again. He had several old scars on his body. Every time I touched them, my breath would catch. Lenj had already dissolved into tears. Huo Fengqiao leaned down, gently wiping away his sister's tears, and then reached out to caress my cheek. Accustomed to being the strongest one in the family, he squeezed out a comforting smile.
My wife, little sister, wait for me to come home.
Only I noticed that. When Huo Fengqiao straightened up and looked ahead, his eyes had already turned completely red. He clenched his teeth and rode away, merging into the thousands of figures departing for war. Whose husbands were they? Whose sons? Defending the country is just a simple phrase, but within those words lie buried the souls of countless heroes since ancient times. Now that Huo Fengqiao had gone to war, I could not spend my days wallowing in sorrow. To help Lenj cheer up quickly as well, I took her with me to serve in Her Majesty the Empress's palace. As expected, the young girl, who had just been wiping away tears for her brother, was immediately distracted upon entering the grand palace. Her attention was immediately diverted, and she stared in wide-eyed wonder. We kowtowed together before the Empress, and heard Her Majesty say with a smile,
As expected of you, Ling Zhaoyu, you just got married. Your husband marched off to war yesterday, and today you are already here to report for duty. You truly are as resilient as a pine tree on a cliff.
After a few pleasantries, I immediately sat down at my desk and began handling my official duties. Her Majesty's study housed countless books. Lenj, who loved reading by nature, immersed herself in them, only occasionally asking me to resolve a query, leaving me with absolutely nothing to worry about. Since I had managed flood control in Jiangnan before taking the imperial exams, the Empress assigned me to water conservancy matters. In my past life, after hearing of Huo Fengqiao's death in battle, I had begged Mei'er to copy a military report for me to read. His death was not due to poor generalship. The report clearly stated, first, that the reinforcements were dispatched too late, making the situation irreversible by the time they arrived. Second, that Jiangdong was water-rich, with a complex network of rivers, and a flood struck during the height of summer, causing many soldiers to lose their lives in vain during flood control efforts. Learning from these lessons, I opened the river map of Jiangdong and began to study it with undivided attention. In this lifetime, I could beg the Empress to issue an early decree to dispatch reinforcements. As for the flood problem in Jiangdong, Huo Fengqiao, I will change your fate for you. Once I had thoroughly mastered the knowledge from the texts, I requested Her Majesty's permission to go to Jiangdong for flood control. Since I would be away from the capital for about 4 months, I wanted to return home to see my parents. Just as I entered the courtyard gate, I saw Mei'er hurrying over to meet me. With tears in her eyes, she clasped my hand tightly.
Eldest sister, you are so heartless. You are going on a long journey without even letting me know. What? Just because you're married, does that mean there is no sisterly affection left between us?
I squeezed her hand back and said with a warm smile, I originally planned to have lunch at home and go to the Duke's estate this afternoon to deliver an invitation. Who would have thought you'd run over here yourself? Mei'er laughed through her tears, linking her arm through mine as we walked inside.
Yes, it is all my fault. I've loved clinging to my big sister since I was a child, and I'll never change in this lifetime.
In our past life, even when she and Wei Chenbi fought heaven and earth, she never cut off contact with me. She would send invitations from the back courtyard, and I would sensibly send Wei Chenbi away to meet with her alone. In this life, we did the exact same thing. Whenever we met, we always had to avoid that troublemaker. As we walked into the main hall, father and mother, who had been waiting for a long time, both came forward to greet me. My heart was filled with joy, but when I spotted a familiar back standing before the rear wall, my smile froze. This was the first time I had run into Wei Chenbi since getting married. On the day of the traditional post-wedding visit, I had deliberately avoided Wei Chenbi. I made sure they were leaving in the morning, so I brought Huo Fengqiao back in the afternoon. I had thought that today, Mei'er would come home alone to see me. I didn't expect her to bring him along. Although the past was in the past, between Wei Chenbi and me, there was no way to laugh off our grievances. He spoke up, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
For an inner court lady like Big Sister to venture into Jiangdong all by herself, you are bound to disappoint Her Majesty the Empress.
I let out a cold laugh, refusing to yield an inch. How would my brother-in-law know? Long before I participated in the female official selection, I had repeatedly gone to Jiangnan to manage flood control. The essays I wrote have all been included in the academy textbooks. When it comes to flood control, among all the civil and military officials in court, there are absolutely no more than 3 who can surpass me.
Big Sister really doesn't know what is good for her.
And my brother-in-law is simply blind and a poor judge of character. Mei'er quickly stepped in to smooth things over. We were supposed to have dinner together as a big family, but seeing the 2 of us fighting tooth and nail, they temporarily split the tables by gender to keep Wei Chenbi and me apart. Mei'er sat close by my side. I asked her, inside the Duke's estate, are things going smoothly? She gave a bitter smile and spoke of her difficult stepmother and half-siblings. She said,
that bunch of despicable people wanted to force concubines on him. Wei Chenbi remained firm and managed to block them all. But later they urged the couple to practice Taoist cultivation and take elixirs together. Wei Chenbi, however, was slow-witted and went along with what those wicked people said.
I let out a succession of cold sneers. That short-lived fool. Even living a second life, he was still blind and foolish. I asked Mei'er how she dealt with it. She said she threw all the elixirs away and even stormed into the Taoist temple to warn the old duke, using the emperor's imperial marriage decree as an excuse. She said if they didn't let her manage the household, she would take the matter directly to the emperor and make it known to everyone so that no one would have any dignity left. I nodded repeatedly at Mei'er. Beautifully done. That is exactly how you should deal with them. Who do they think is an easy target? But Mei'er sighed softly and said aggrievedly,
because of my iron-fisted household management. Brother Chenbi lost his temper with me for the first time. Big sister, tell me, big sister, did I go too far?
It suddenly dawned on me. In our past life, Lianji was able to follow Mei'er as a female official and treated her sister-in-law like her own mother. Perhaps she too had once been like me, dealing with those wicked servants in the general's estate. I am doing well, and Mei'er is doing well too. Only Wei Chenbi is a fool. I spat in disdain and said, I was actually going to blame you for caring too much about appearances. Listen to me, Mei'er. You must never show mercy to your stepmother's family. When it is time to be ruthless, you must be ruthless. You didn't go too far. If you hadn't, they would have been the ones going too far. As for Wei Chenbi, I didn't lower my voice. At the other table behind the screen, Wei Chenbi seemed to turn his head to look over. I quickly covered my mouth and whispered, why do you care about him? Good advice cannot save those bent on doom. In our past life, Wei Chenbi died young at 35. Everyone thought it was a pity, but I was the only one who felt he lived a muddled life, harming both himself and others. Mei'er smiled bitterly.
Big sister, you don't understand. I have feelings for him. How could I just abandon him?
I was temporarily at a loss for words. I picked up a few pieces of meat with my chopsticks to suppress my frustration and then said, this is the path you chose for yourself. No matter how it turns out, you must bear it yourself. I have only one piece of advice. If you eventually fall out with Wei Chenbi, at least leave yourself an heir. You love lively company so much. Don't end up growing old in loneliness. Mei'er stared intently at me. A warm breeze blew in, carrying the scent of flowers. She suddenly asked me,
Big sister, you were reborn too, weren't you?
My chopsticks paused. Then, I readily nodded and admitted it. Mei'er remained silent for a long time. Finally, lowering her head, she said to me in a hoarse voice,
Big sister, in this life, I will never drag you down again. Just focus on climbing higher. I won't let anyone harm you again.
It was only later that I heard from Mother that Wei Chenbi had contacted many officials to submit a memorial impeaching me and Huo Fengqiao. Mother couldn't understand why, but only Mei'er and I knew he was harboring grudges from our past life and wanted to seek revenge. But all this trouble was blocked by Mei'er. She even risked her life to stop him over this matter. In her state of terror, she suffered a miscarriage of a fully formed fetus. Mother said that when she heard the news and went to visit, Wei Chenbi was furiously scolding his concubine-born siblings. From his words, it seemed to also involve his stepmother, Lady Bai. What else could it be for? It must have been that when he was making trouble for Mei'er, Lady Bai led her children to join in the harassment. This brought bitter suffering to Mei'er. This whole situation. It was only after I successfully completed the water conservancy project in Jiangdong that I finally figured all of this out. After hearing Mother finish her story, I walked out of the room. I received the imperial decree to enter the palace to receive my reward and promotion without even having time to take off the newly changed purple-red Qilin official uniform. I rushed into the Duke's estate in a burning hurry and threw myself to Mei'er's bedside. Her face was completely devoid of color. Hearing my arrival, she opened her eyes weakly to look at me.
Big sister, you're finally back. Big sister.
She gently touched my face.
You've grown so thin from all the hard work.
She wanted to go to the kitchen herself to cook my favorite dishes to help me nurse my health. I quickly pressed her back down, telling her that taking care of herself was the best way to ease my mind. After coaxing Mei'er to sleep, I stepped out of the room to settle all the scores. Before me, with disheveled hair, Wei Chenbi stood with a face full of guilt in the cold autumn rain, looking at the pale-faced Mei'er on the sickbed, who had just lost her child. Ling Zhaoyu could no longer suppress the rage in her heart. Wei Chenbi. Wei Chenbi. In our past life you dragged me down and kept me trapped in the inner manor for 15 years. In this life you caused Mei'er to lose her child. Just how many people do you have to ruin before you are satisfied? Wei Chenbi stood in the rain, his face filled with remorse. Unable to utter a single word, he finally understood how much harm his lifelong muddle-headedness had brought to those around him.
Rest assured, I will pay back everything. In this life, I won't dirty your hands again.
Over the following month, word kept spreading from the Duke's estate. Wei Chenbi seized the household management rights, found a suitable marriage for his concubine-born sister to marry far away, and sent his concubine-born brothers to the military camp for training. He did exactly what I had done in our past life, but Lady Bai had committed too many evils and eventually died of illness brought on by accumulated grief much earlier than in the past life. On the day Huo Fengqiao returned victorious from the war, Mei'er, who had just recovered her health, also came to visit. Seeing my husband, my sister, and me weeping in each other's arms, her eyes also welled with tears. In the bedroom, Mei'er said she was tired, so I gently took her into my arms and lay down side by side with her. She leaned against my shoulder, weeping silently. After a long while, she said to me,
Eldest sister, Brother Chenbi asked me yesterday if I would still be willing to bear his children. If I agree, he could live a little longer and wait until he sees me safely give birth before going to atone for his sins.
I also remained quiet for a long time before asking her what she planned to do. Mei'er's tears flowed even faster, covering her face with both hands. She curled up in distress in my arms, sobbing so hard she could barely catch her breath, almost coughing up blood. I hurriedly tried to call for a physician, but Mei'er grabbed me tightly.
Don't panic, eldest sister. Listen to my answer first. I sat alone in my room all of last night, and he knelt outside my door all night as well. Before dawn, I walked to the door, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. So through the door, I replied to him, I do not agree.
Mei'er did not agree. That was why she had fled to my place today. She had probably anticipated what would happen just as dusk fell. Amidst a torrential downpour, the housekeeper of the Duke's estate rushed over to deliver the funeral notice. He said Wei Chenbi, due to long-term depression, coupled with the damage to his body from taking alchemical pills in his early years, had finally passed away from illness. Since it was an imperial marriage, she could not return to her maiden home. After handling the family's funeral arrangements, Mei'er went to the palace to request permission to go to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to organize ancient texts. From then on, the once bustling Duke's estate became empty and deserted. As rain battered the fallen blossoms, the doors were shut tight. My heart ached that she would spend the rest of her lonely life, accompanied only by green lanterns and ancient scriptures. But Mei'er smiled calmly and replied to me,
Eldest sister, actually, looking at the past life, what you went through at the Duke's estate in our past life, I did have my doubts. I suspected Wei Chenbi was probably only good for romance, but not for building a life together. But I was greedy. I kept thinking that the only reason he treated you poorly was because he didn't love you. I thought if I married him, we would surely have a harmonious marriage.
In the end, it turns out I was wrong. She looked at me, casting aside all greed and resentment.
Now, Sister, I also want to walk the path you took. I want to try and see if I can be like a solitary pine on a cliff.
Both of us took the exams to become female officials. I specialized in water conservancy, while she focused on organizing ancient texts. In the years that followed, Mei'er did not waste the rest of her life. Instead, staying in the quiet Imperial Ancestral Temple, she compiled a historical text to be passed down to future generations, leaving her name in history. As for my own family, because I had prepared early and repaired the waterways in Jiangdong and had petitioned in advance to send reinforcements, I broke the fate of certain death that awaited Huo Fengqiao, as if guided by heaven. In the Battle of Jiangdong, although he saved his life, he was severely injured and was left with a chronic ailment. A blessing lies within a misfortune, and a misfortune hides within a blessing. Because of this, Huo Fengqiao was permitted to stay in the capital to supervise the three armies, no longer having to risk his life on the front lines. Although one of his legs was crippled, he didn't sigh or complain at all. After half a year, he was able to use all his limbs to invent his own moves, defeating many fierce generals in the camp. He usually used a cane, but he would purposely throw it aside when he was in front of me and Liange. When I asked him why he did that, Huo Fengqiao lowered his head, always acting self-conscious and pitiful in front of me.
I was afraid of ruining your mood.
I gave his chest a hard punch and scolded him with a mock fierce look. You're looking down on people again. Hearing this, his eyes curved into a smile and he leaned into my arms.
My dear you, I will absolutely never do it again in this lifetime.
In the years that followed, our lives flourished. I gave birth to a daughter. I originally wanted to raise her like Liange and Zheng'er, to have her become a civil official. Who would have thought that seeing her father, despite his bad leg, could still scale roofs and leap over walls? She became obsessed with martial arts. As she kept practicing, she eventually joined the military camp. Just like Huo Fengqiao, at just the age of a teenager, she went to the battlefield to win glory, astounding the entire imperial court. I could only shake my head and smile with a sigh, but Liange advised me.
Sister-in-law, do you still have time to worry about the girl? Now that the position of Prime Minister is vacant, if you don't make your move, I'm going to compete for it.
By the way, in our past life, when Zheng'er became the Prime Minister, he openly said that his glorious achievement was entirely due to my teaching. He said he had been dreaming and hoping that if I could step out of the inner courtyard, I more than him deserved to sit in this position to realize my inner ambitions and bring blessings to the people. In this life, I will certainly do so. On the day I became the Prime Minister, I stood before the grand red threshold of the Golden Throne Hall, looking up at the sky. Zheng'er, the path you once walked, Mother has walked it too. Your hope, Mother has fulfilled it for you. Outside the Imperial Palace, my husband, my daughter, and my sister-in-law are waiting for me to go home. The way they look at me is filled with deep affection from beginning to end. Holding Huo Fengqiao's hand, he says to me,
Mei'er also took the day off to come home today to congratulate you on becoming Prime Minister.
I smile gently and say, I love eating the food Mei'er cooks the most. It looks like we'll have a wonderful feast tonight. The evening glow lingers, casting a beautiful red light over the wide road before us. I stride forward, never looking back. My past life was not bad, but this life is truly wonderful. A woman's world has never been limited to the walls of a courtyard. With mountains and seas in your heart, there is no need to be trapped in a tiny space. With strength in your own hands, there is no need to depend on others. The warmth of sisterly solidarity, the security of family companionship, and the fulfillment of benefiting the people through one's own efforts are far more precious than forced love. May you, before the screen, also break free from the shackles of convention, refuse to be defined, fear no rumors, stride forward in your own life, become your own unique light, and live as the person you most want to be.